Why are transphobes so obsessed with basic biology?
Women's rights have long been under threat from the trans lobby, it seems, and now we are fighting back.
Male and female. Sex is biology.
Feminist campaigner Jenny Watson, she's opening Britain's first lesbian members bar, available only to biological women.
Not about what gender someone says they are. It's literally biology.
You need to acknowledge truth and reality in biology when having these discussions.
It's strange, really. Basic biology is what you learn when you're a child, but there's nothing basic about biology. What you learn as a child is a greatly simplified version of what's really happening. This is to help children understand more complex biological ideas. You would think full-grown adults would get that. Who am I kidding? They're transphobes. They like to pull facts out of thin air, or, as they seem to prefer, out of biased studies that are not supported by medical professionals. No matter how the understanding of transgender biology and psychology evolves to them, it all comes back to basic biology. The reason transphobes probably have such trouble listening to anyone else's point of view is because they have their heads shoved so far up their arse their hearing is impaired. All jokes aside, if you actually have a look at the more complex science and take a second to try and understand it, anyone can see that trans people exist. They are not something people pretend to be for social media followers. If they even took the time to speak to a trans person, you would hope they'd realize trans people aren't mythical creatures that only exist in fairy tales. Now let's move on to the biology, something transphobes seem to love, until it counters their beliefs. First thing transphobes love to shout is, yeah, well, you're a woman, you've got XX chromosomes. I find it funny when they get the chromosomes they intended to say mixed up. It really proves they mean it when they say the no basic biology. Anyway, one example of some not so basic biology are chromosomal disorders. One example is something called Swyer syndrome. This is when someone who has XY chromosomes, typically found in men, has female reproductive organs. Girls with Swyer syndrome lack ovaries but have functional genitalia and look female. Now, I don't know where someone with Swyer syndrome would fall on a transphobe's gender scale, as they have female genitalia, not as a result of surgery, which according to transphobes makes you a woman, yet they have XY chromosomes, which according to transphobes makes you a man. I guess that's something to ponder. Now let's swerve off this path and have a look at the brain of trans people, cis people, and transphobes. Starting with transphobes, they tend to have rather small brains with few wrinkles, and they often resemble the brain of a chicken. Disclaimer, that was a joke. Although I vote studies should be done. Moving on. Studies have been done comparing the brains of cis women and gender dysphoric trans women. They found that the brains of cis and trans women shared similarities that the control group cis men did not have. It was found that trans and cis women had a smaller gray matter volume in their left somatosensory and primary motor cortices in comparison to cisgender male controls. However, the sample size was small, so we will want to look at another study to check these findings. In another study with over 800 participants and reviewed by medical professionals, it was found that trans people actually have a unique phenotype to cis people. In other words, trans people's brains seem to have different characteristics to cisgender brains. The last transphobic argument I will be covering, as I cannot face scrolling through far-right TikTok anymore, is that they seem convinced all trans people are going to want to detransition at some point. In no way do I want to invalidate the stories and lives of people who have detransitioned. I couldn't find an exact percentage, but most studies found that less than 10% of trans people detransition, and of that small percentage, 82.5% of detransitioners said that external factors, such as bullying, family pressure, and an increased risk of hate crime violence had a large role to play in their choice to detransition. I find this statistic upsetting. If someone chooses to detransition, it should be because they want to feel comfortable in themselves, and detransitioning is the way to achieve that. People's choice to detransition should not have to include factors like fear and bullying by people around them. Despite this, it's still less than 10% detransitioning. If anyone knows the exact percentage, leave it in the comments. There are high levels of mental illness among trans teens, such as depression. Suicide rates in trans teens due to things like dysphoria are way too high and higher than their straight cis peers. Transitioning improves mental well-being and decreases suicide levels in trans people. If I was offered a potentially life-saving surgery that would also make me a much happier person, and the risk of it going wrong, not fatally wrong, but wrong, was less than 10%, I would 100% want that surgery. No questions. And medications like hormone blockers aren't irreversible, so why are transphobes fighting them? Cis children use them if they start puberty too early. And lastly, will transphobes stop saying cis is a slur? It's silly. It's a prefix used in many different situations. For example, in chemistry we have stereoisomers, you can have trans isomers, or you can have, wait for it, cis isomers. Oh no, how will the isomer ever get over the fact that O called it cis? See how silly that sounds. Oh dear, what has the world come to? Now I know this isn't the basic biology you transphobes are used to, so give it a second to sink in. Just because you don't understand something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Yes, I'm still talking to you transphobes. I don't understand how record players work, yet I still know they exist. As some transphobes like to say, look at the facts, not feelings. Well, here are the facts and I'm feeling great. Have a great day.